The delicate lace of my wedding dress felt suddenly heavy against my skin as I stared at the tiny USB drive in my hands. Sarah, my sister, had pressed it into my palm just moments before, her perfectly manicured fingers lingering perhaps a second too long. "Don't open it until after the ceremony," she'd whispered, a strange smile playing at her lips. "Consider it my special gift to you." I should have known then. Should have seen it in the way her eyes didn't quite meet mine, in the subtle tension around her mouth. But I was too caught up in the whirlwind of my wedding day to notice these warning signs. Growing up, Sarah had always been the perfect one. While I stumbled through life making mistakes and learning hard lessons, she glided through with effortless grace. Our parents never tired of comparing us. Sarah's straight A's to my B's, her cheerleading victories to my debate team achievements, her string of perfect boyfriends to my awkward dating history. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood, playing on repeat until I almost believed there was something fundamentally wrong with me. But then I met Marcus. Marcus Thorne walked into my life on a rainy Tuesday afternoon at the local coffee shop where I worked part-time while finishing my master's thesis. He ordered a complicated drink with exactly 3 pumps of hazelnut syrup and asked for my number while I was still trying to figure out how to ring it up. His smile was warm, genuine, and somehow made me forget all about my sister's shadow. For the first time in my life, someone chose me first. Marcus didn't care that I wasn't the perfect daughter or the most popular girl. He loved my passionate rants about environmental conservation, laughed at my terrible puns, and looked at me like I was the most fascinating person he'd ever met. When he proposed after 2 years of dating, I couldn't believe my luck. My parents were thrilled. Finally, their less accomplished daughter was doing something right. Sarah, however, had been strangely quiet at the engagement dinner. "I'm so happy for you," she'd said, but something in her tone felt off. I dismissed it as wedding stress. After all, she was my maid of honor and had thrown herself into planning every detail of my special day. Now, standing in the bridal suite of the Grand Plaza Hotel, I turned the USB drive over in my hands. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm glow over everything. My wedding dress, a classic A-line with delicate beading, hung nearby. In just 3 hours, I would walk down the aisle to marry the love of my life. "Maddie," my mother's voice startled me from my thoughts. "The makeup artist is here." I quickly slipped the USB drive into my clutch. Whatever was on it could wait until after the ceremony, just as Sarah had said. The next few hours passed in a blur of hairspray, makeup, and nervous excitement. My bridesmaids fluttered around me like colorful butterflies in their sage green dresses, adjusting my veil, touching up my lipstick, and sharing nervous giggles. Sarah was conspicuously absent from most of the preparation, citing last-minute maid of honor duties. When she finally appeared, her own makeup was flawless, her blonde hair styled in elegant waves that made my simple updo feel inadequate in comparison. "Everything's perfect," she assured me, but there was something in her expression I couldn't quite read. Later, I would recognize it as guilt. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Marcus looked handsome in his black tuxedo, his eyes filling with tears as I walked down the aisle. Our vows were personal and heartfelt. I promised to always support his dreams, and he vowed to love me unconditionally. Sarah stood beside me, holding my bouquet, her face a mask of serene happiness. But there were moments, brief flickers, when I caught her looking at Marcus with an intensity that seemed out of place. Once, during the exchange of rings, I could have sworn I saw him glance her way, but I dismissed it as another trick of my nervous mind. The reception was everything I dreamed of. The ballroom sparkled with thousands of tiny lights, the dance floor filled with laughing guests, and the champagne flowed freely. Marcus and I shared our first dance to "At Last" by Etta James, and for those few precious minutes, everything felt perfect. Sarah gave her maid of honor speech, her voice thick with emotion as she talked about growing up together, about watching me find love. "Marcus is exactly what my sister deserves," she said, raising her glass. "To the happy couple." If only I'd noticed how her hand trembled slightly as she spoke those words. It wasn't until late that night, after the last guest had left and Marcus had fallen asleep in our hotel suite, that I remembered the USB drive. I sat at the desk in a sitting area, still in my wedding dress, and plugged it into my laptop. A single folder appeared, labeled "Open Me." Inside were dozens of files, photos, videos, and text messages. My cursor hovered over the first image, and as I clicked, my world shattered. There they were, Marcus and Sarah, wrapped in an intimate embrace. The timestamp showed it was from just 2 weeks ago. My hands began to shake as I opened file after file, each one worse than the last. Text messages revealing months of secret meetings, photos taken in hotels, restaurants, and places I recognized from my own dates with Marcus. The final video was dated just yesterday, my sister and my fiancé in the hotel's storage room, planning their future together. Once she finds out, Marcus's voice came through my laptop speakers. We won't have to hide anymore. Sarah's response was like a knife to my heart. I've always been better for you anyway. She'll understand eventually. She's used to me getting everything first. I sat there in my wedding dress, staring at the screen until the sun began to rise. The weight of the betrayal pressed against my chest until I could hardly breathe. All those times Sarah had been helping with wedding preparations, all those late-night meetings Marcus had for work, it had all been a lie. But as the initial shock wore off, something else began to take its place. A cold, calculating anger I didn't know I possessed. Sarah had always taken everything from me, always had to be first, always had to win. She probably expected me to crumble, to run away in tears, leaving them free to be together. Not this time. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, my makeup still perfect, my dress still pristine. I was done being the sister who gave up, who stepped aside, who accepted second best. Sarah had given me this USB drive expecting it to destroy me. Instead, it had given me something far more valuable. The truth, and with it, the power to finally take control of my own story. I opened my phone and began making calls. First to my lawyer, then to the family accountant, and finally to a private investigator I'd hired months ago on a hunch, one Sarah and Marcus knew nothing about. By the time Marcus stirred in the bedroom, I had set everything in motion. The sun was fully up now, casting long shadows across the hotel room floor. I heard Marcus moving around, probably wondering why I wasn't in bed. In a few minutes, he would come looking for me, expecting to find his devastated new wife. Instead, he would find someone very different. I smoothed my dress, checked my makeup one last time, and turned on my laptop's camera to record. After all, if Sarah could collect evidence, so could I. And I had a feeling the next few hours would be very interesting indeed. The bedroom door opened and Marcus stepped out, his hair tousled from sleep. "Maddie, what are you doing up so early?" I turned to face him, Sarah's USB drive displayed prominently on the desk beside me. "Good morning, husband," I said, my voice steady and cold. "We need to talk about my sister." His face went pale, and I knew the real story was just beginning. Marcus stood frozen in the doorway, his face a mask of confusion that quickly morphed into panic as his eyes landed on the USB drive. "Maddie, I can explain," he stammered, taking a step forward. I held up my hand, stopping him in his tracks. "Actually, I think I can explain better." I turned my laptop screen toward him, showing a paused frame of him and Sarah together. "You see, while you were busy sneaking around with my sister, I was busy too." His confusion deepened. I could almost see the gears turning in his head, trying to figure out how much I knew, how he could spin this. That's when I decided to show my full hand. 6 months ago, I continued, my voice steady. I noticed something odd about the company's accounts. I watched his face pale further. Wire transfers to offshore accounts, suspicious consultancy fees, and interesting patterns in our client contracts. Marcus swallowed hard. As the CFO of his family's investment firm, he had always been careful, always meticulous. But he had underestimated me, just like everyone else always had. "I hired a private investigator," I said, pulling out a thick folder. "At first it was just to confirm my suspicions about you and Sarah. But he found so much more." I spread the documents across the desk, bank statements, transaction records, emails. "You've been embezzling from your own company for years." "That's ridiculous," he scoffed, but his voice cracked. "You can't prove anything." I smiled, the same cold smile Sarah had given me yesterday. "Actually, I can. You see, while you were busy planning your future with my sister, I was gathering evidence. Every transaction, every fake contract, every penny you stole, it's all here." "Why?" he whispered, collapsing into a chair. "Why go through all this?" "Because I knew." I stood up, my wedding dress rustling softly. I knew about you and Sarah months ago. The late night meetings, the secret phone calls, the way you both looked at each other when you thought I wasn't watching. But I needed proof, not just of your affair, but of everything. I walked to the window, looking out at the city below. You thought I was naive, didn't you? The quiet, unassuming wife who would never suspect her perfect husband. Sarah probably thought the same, the simple sister who would never catch on to her betrayal. Maddie, please, Marcus began, but I cut him off. I've already sent copies of everything to the SEC, the FBI, and your company's board of directors. I checked my watch. They should be receiving them right about now. As if on cue, his phone began buzzing frantically. Text messages, emails, missed calls. His carefully constructed world was crumbling in real time. You'll lose everything too, he said desperately. Half of what I owned is yours now. We're married. I laughed, a genuine laugh that seemed to startle him. No, Marcus, we're not. You see, I never signed the marriage certificate. Yesterday wasn't legally binding, just a very expensive party. His face contorted with rage. You planned this? You went through with the wedding knowing you were sleeping with my sister. Planning to leave me once you'd secured the merger with my family's company? I pulled out another document. Yes, I knew about that too. The prenup you insisted on. I had my own lawyers review it very carefully. They found some interesting clauses buried in the fine print. Just then, the door burst open. Sarah stood there, still in her maid of honor dress, her perfect makeup now smeared with tears. Marcus, they're saying something about fraud on the news. What's happening? I turned to face my sister, feeling oddly calm. Hello, Sarah. I was just explaining to Marcus how your special wedding gift backfired. She froze, her eyes darting between us. What do you mean? The USB drive, your evidence of your affair with my husband. Did you really think I would just fall apart when I saw it? Run away in tears while you consoled Marcus and took my place. I didn't, she stuttered. You didn't think. I finished for her. You never had to. Everything always came easily to you. Grades, popularity, success. Even when you wanted something that belonged to someone else, you just took it. I walked over to her, my wedding dress trailing behind me. But this time, Sarah, you made a crucial mistake. You underestimated me, just like Marcus did. The sound of commotion in the hallway drew our attention. Heavy footsteps approached, followed by authoritative voices. Marcus made a move toward the balcony, but I already knew it was too late. Federal agents. The door flew open as FBI agents poured into the room. Marcus raised his hands slowly, his face ashen. Sarah pressed herself against the wall, watching in horror as her perfect world collapsed. I stood calmly in the center of the room, still in my wedding dress, as chaos erupted around me. One of the agents approached, notepad in hand. Ms. Harrison, we'll need your statement about the financial records you sent us. I nodded, watching as Marcus was handcuffed and led away. Sarah remained frozen, her mascara running down her cheeks. Maddie, she whispered, I'm so sorry. No, I said softly, you're not. Not yet. But you will be. I turned to the agent. You'll find Sarah's involvement in the fraud documented as well. She knew about the embezzlement and helped cover it up. Sarah's scream of protest was cut short as another agent approached her with handcuffs. As she was led away, she looked back at me one last time. I'm your sister, she pleaded. You stopped being my sister the moment you decided to betray me, I replied. But thank you for the USB drive. It made for an interesting wedding night. Hours later, I sat in my hotel room, now changed out of my wedding dress into comfortable clothes. My phone had been buzzing nonstop, messages from family, friends, reporters. The story was everywhere. Investment firm CFO arrested for massive fraud scheme, bride reveals all on wedding night. My parents arrived around sunset, their faces drawn with shock and confusion. How could you do this to your sister? My mother demanded. I looked at her steadily. How could you always choose her over me? That silenced her. My father sat heavily in a chair, looking suddenly old. We never meant to. But you did, I said quietly. Every time you compared us, every time you wished I was more like her, you pushed me aside. Well, now you know, I'm not like Sarah. I'm better. They left shortly after, unable to process that their perfect daughter was being charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, while their disappointing daughter had brought down a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise. A week later, I sat in my new apartment, watching the sunset over the city. The story had made national news, and job offers were pouring in from financial investigation firms impressed by my attention to detail and strategic thinking. Marcus and Sarah were facing serious federal charges, and the evidence against them was overwhelming. I opened my laptop, inserting the USB drive one last time. The photos and messages that were meant to destroy me now served as a reminder. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying others. It's about finally becoming who you were always meant to be. My phone buzzed with a text from the FBI agent handling the case. Another arrest made. More evidence found. I smiled, closing the laptop. Sarah had given me what she thought was a weapon to break me. Instead, she had given me the key to my freedom. The sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Tomorrow, I would start my new job as a forensic accountant at one of the country's top firms. My sister had always been the star, the favorite, the perfect one. But perfection, I had learned, often hid the deepest flaws. As for me, I was done hiding in shadows, done being the second choice, the afterthought. Sarah's USB drive hadn't just exposed her betrayal. It had freed me from a lifetime of trying to measure up to impossible standards. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as weapons. Sometimes the person everyone underestimates turns out to be the strongest of all. And sometimes, just sometimes, the sister who was never good enough becomes the one who changes everything. I poured myself a glass of champagne, the same expensive brand we'd served at the wedding, and raised it in a silent toast. To new beginnings, to unexpected endings, and to the power of finally standing up for yourself. The USB drive sat on my desk, a small black rectangle that had changed everything. Sarah had meant it to be my undoing, but instead, it had become my liberation. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting free. And I was finally, completely, wonderfully free.